What up, world? Established Rich coming right back at you. Tonight we got to get into a story that cuts deep into hip-hop history and deeper into accountability. We talking about a man who once stood among the most electric performers of his era. A man who had a voice so distinct, so full of energy it could shake a building. We talking about Mystikal and the long, painful journey his legal issues have taken on him. This ain't about judging him or playing social media jury. This is about looking at a pattern that stretches 2 decades and asking what happens when talent and trouble collide. Because if you was outside in the late 90s, early 2005, you know exactly who Mystikal is. He wasn't just a rapper. He was a force of nature. He came from New Orleans with that wild, commanding flow that made you stop whatever you was doing and pay attention. And when he joined No Limit Records, he fit like he was born inside the tank. Master P had the business, C Murder had the edge, Silk had the energy, and Mystikal had that voice. But here's the truth we gotta talk about tonight. As great as his music was, his legal issues were always the shadow behind the spotlight. Every time his career restarted, something pulled him back down. Every time the culture would start letting him back in, another case would appear. And I'm gonna try to break down how he went from superstar status to where he is right now, sitting behind bars awaiting trial, denied bond, and facing the most serious consequences of his life.
His mom told me she's praying for her son, but family members and his longtime friend declined to comment further today. This is video of them exiting the Ascension Parish Courthouse just after 3 o'clock this afternoon. They were in court all day waiting to hear what a judge would do to update this case. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit as he sat there in court with the letters APSO on the back. Mystikal has been held without bond since his 2022 arrest on domestic violence charges. He's entered not guilty pleas to those charges. Today, attorneys for all sides agreed they'll meet again next week to discuss future dates for the case. A gag order is in place in this case, which prohibits attorneys on both sides from speaking about it. A trial date and bond review date could be scheduled soon. For the
Listen, the facts show a man whose talent couldn't outrun his history. The latest case dates back to 2022 when an allegation surfaced out of Louisiana. An incident reported at a hospital led to Mystikal's arrest and an entire list of charges. Over time, those charges grew, including claims related to confinement, substances, and a series of other serious accusations. And on November 19th, 2025, a judge ruled that he would not receive bond, which means he will remain behind bars until his trial in 2026. This is a man who is 55 years old now, and he is staring at a future that could take away the rest of his life. Again, he has pled not guilty to everything, but the courts are looking at his past. And his past is heavy because this ain't the first time he's faced some serious accusations. This ain't the second time. This is part of a long pattern that has defined his career more than music ever did. His name should have been remembered for his hits, but over the years, his name has been attached to court cases more than music. And that right there is the heartbreak of this story. You can see how much people love Mystikal, the artist, but you can also see how much they feel Mystikal, the headline. In early 2005, when his first case hit, it stalled his entire career. He served time, got out, tried to rebuild, and then more legal issues came. Even when he got another shot, a label deal, a few big collaborations, something always brought him right back into the system. And this is the part we got to talk about honestly. At some point, a pattern becomes a pattern. At some point, the industry stops looking at you as a comeback story and starts looking at you as a liability. Think about it. No Limit was ready to support him again. Master P even spoke publicly in 2023, asking people to hold back their judgment until the facts came out. But even with that support, even with that history, even with that family, this one just hit too hard because this time the system said no bond, which means this ain't just a case. This is a life-changing moment. And you know what makes it even more tragic? Mystikal was one of the most original artists of his era. He brought something to rap that didn't sound like anybody else. He could have been a legend we talked about for his art, not his headlines. And yet here we are, decades later, talking about court documents, not music. We gotta ask ourselves, how did we get here? How did someone with so much talent end up in so much crisis? Was it the environment he came from? Was it the people he surrounded himself with? Or was it him? His choices, his impulses, his inability to stay out of situations that kept destroying him. Now we got to talk about the part nobody wants to face because this is when it gets real. This is when we stop talking about what happened and start talking about what comes next. And let me tell you something. What comes next is not just a court date. It's a crossroads, a moment where a man's entire life can swing one way or the other with no middle road. Because when you 55 years old and you sitting in a cell awaiting trial in 2026, you're not just waiting on a verdict. You staring your own legacy in the mirror, trying to figure out how much of it you can save. And this is the hardest part to talk about. The culture has already made its decision before the court ever will. Not on guilt or innocence, but the reality that a pattern this long can't be ignored no more. Because there's a moment in every falling star story will people stop and say, let's wait for the truth, and start saying, we've seen this before. And whether we like it or not, Mystikal has reached that moment. The industry is a machine that moves fast. And when you can't keep up, it leaves you behind without even looking back. That's not cruelty. That's survival in a business where image is everything. And right now, Mystikal's image ain't just bruised. It's been broken, repaired, shattered again, and taped back together too many times. No label wants to touch that. No promoter wants to risk that. And no brand wants to stand next to him. Because whether he beat the case or not, the court of public perception doesn't require evidence. It just requires memory. And people remember everything. So let's talk about the reality he's facing if this trial goes badly. Because if he's convicted of these charges, he's staring at years, decades, potentially the rest of his life behind bars. At 55 years old, a sentence like that don't just end a career. It ends a chapter. It ends a book. It closes the cover and puts it on the highest shelf. And this is where the heartbreak fully sets in. Because you can see the gulf between who he was and who he is now. And no matter how much you respect the artistry, you can't escape the pattern. But we also have to be honest about something else. The system sees history too. Judges look at past cases, prior accusations, previous sentences, and they factor all of that in today. So when the court says no bond, they're not just talking about this case. They're talking about years of red flags waving in the same direction. And this is why he's still sitting in that cell. Not because of one incident, but because of the weight of all of them stacked together. Now let's shift to something even deeper. His legacy, because this might be the real tragedy of the entire story. Mystikal should have been a legend we talk about at the top of the 2000 rappers list. Instead, he's a warning story we whisper about in the back of the room. His catalog wasn't the longest, but it was impactful. But when your headlines replace your hits, your legacy starts to erase. And that's what happened here. Year after year, issue after issue. We got to talk about the cultural impact of this too, because fans are left with whiplash. They remember the artists they grew up on, but they can't ignore the stories that came after. And when you're a public figure, especially in hip hop, you carry a responsibility whether you want to or not. Your actions don't just affect you. They affect the entire culture watching you. And that's why so many people feel hurt, betrayed, or just tired of the drama. Because they spent years rooting for a comeback that never came. Now let's get even deeper. Let's talk about reflecting. What does a man think about when he's sitting in the cell with nothing but time? He thinks about missed opportunities. He's thinking about better decisions he could have made. He's thinking about every person that tried to help him and every bridge he burned. And he thinks about how his career wasn't ended by the industry, but by his own choices. And that's a level of accountability no fan, no critic, and no blogger can deliver. Only life can do that. So what does the future look like if he's found not guilty? Because we have to address that possibility too. Even if he walks free, the industry won't fully embrace him again. There will be no major label deals, no brand support, no large-scale comeback tour. The trust is broken, the image is damaged, and the public has already moved on. He'd be starting from zero with a name that carries more weight than opportunity. So what does the future look like if he's found guilty? Well, then we're talking about a permanent end to the artist we once knew. His career will freeze in place, forever stuck in the chapter before the fall. The music will still exist, but the person behind it will be locked away, possibly for good. His legacy will become a complex footnote in hip-hop history, a mixture of talent and tragedy, a story about a man who could have been great but couldn't make the right decisions. Listen, this story is about choices, consequences, and the unforgiving nature of reality. This is about a man who had the world in his hands and lost his grip one incident at a time. And when you look at Mystikal today, you see the full weight of them choices catching up to him. You see a man fighting a case, but you also see a man fighting his past. The music will always be there, but the man who made it may not get a chance to write another chapter. And that's the hardest part of all. Sometimes a story don't end with a comeback. Sometimes it ends with a lesson the world wishes the artist had learned sooner. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe. Establish Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.